Before I will start a lecture about REST services, I want to ensure that you are aware of what was before it. Let's talk about such term as MVC web architecture and its place in past in present time. MVC is acronym, where M is model, V is view, C is controller. Do you know what is called client in the context of web? It's pretty simple. I talk about any device from which you can surf in the internet. For example, it may be a laptop, as on the slide. If we talk more precisely about a client, we imply a browser, such as Firefox, Chrome, etc. Okay, and what about a server? Usually server is something mysterious, especially for QAs and testers who have no appropriate level of technical knowledges. It's not acceptable for my students, so let's concisely clarify what is server in context of web. In general, it's instance of some operation system, as example Linux or Windows, where special software installed. What kind of special software? Well, it can be anything for interpretation or runtime of popular server-side programming languages, such as Java, Python, PHP, Ruby, and so on. Main goal of software is to process and handle incoming requests from a client side. I have already said that server is nothing else as an instance of some operation system. It can be a real existed hardware computer connected to the internet, or as we used to in nowadays, cloud platform with a provisioned virtual machine. By the way, the most common communication protocol between a client and a server is HTTP. Now I suggest you to overview how a classic MVC architecture works. Let's assume that you visited some blog and clicked on a certain blog link. In this moment you triggered HTTP GET request to server. Server receives the request and starts its processing by particular controller which is responsible for blog post clicking. A next step which occurs on a server is directing of request to database. In this example we need to retrieve blog post title, date and content. You may be confused how server determines for which exactly blog post information is needed. The server has this information from the URL which can be encoded there. After successful data selecting, the controller gets back data about the blog post from the database. And it's time for further request processing. Now it's turn to place this data into some user-acceptable representation state. For this purpose, controller goes to views and gets there all template snippets which this page needs. When the controller already has a data and a view, it unites them together and formulates complete HTML page, which can be sent back to the client. By HTTP response, the HTML page which represents the blog post renders in a client browser and user can see the content which he wanted to see. That's how classic MVC request lifecycle works. The main feature of this approach is reload of entire page. And you have also noticed the second one feature, is that any pages of the same time, for example blog post page, is similar to the another ones. So the one different part is the different content for each of them. If you are interested in the real examples and more deep understanding of MVC, I recommend you to have some practice with the popular platforms such as WordPress, Joomla or Drupal.